For 5,000 years, the galaxy was silent. Stars were born, lived, and died in that long quiet. Civilizations rose to power, built great empires, and then crumbled into dust. Planets that once carried proud cities became wastelands, their ruins swallowed by time. Space, so wide and endless, carried no voice except the hum of distant suns. But silence is never complete. Hidden deep inside the void, beyond the paths of trade and empire, there was a signal. Weak, old, and endless. It pulsed like a faint heartbeat across the darkness. It was not a normal signal. It was not trade or song or science. It was a cry. A voice locked inside repeating waves. No one alive remembered when it began. Records from ancient archives spoke of it. Some called it the Call of Ashes. Some called it the Curse of the Stars. It was a distress call, or so it seemed, sent from a war long forgotten. It had traveled for thousands of years, whispering to anyone who could listen. At first, many races had tried to answer it. Long ago, when the galaxy was young, explorers followed the voice. They wanted to help. They wanted to know who was crying across the centuries, but none of them ever returned. Entire fleets were lost. Whole species disappeared after following the signal. In time, fear grew. Fear became law, so the galaxy made a choice. The signal must be ignored. Ships were ordered never to approach it. Children were told stories about it. Warnings passed down through generations. If you follow the voice, you will vanish. For 5,000 years, the galaxy obeyed its own fear. The signal was left alone. But humanity was different. Humans were new compared to the ancient races. They had not seen the first empires fall. They had not carried the scars of forgotten wars. For humanity, the galaxy was not a place of fear, but of wonder. They were explorers, dreamers, and builders. They had stepped from their blue homeworld, Earth, into the stars with wide eyes and reckless courage. And one day, on the edge of known space, a human vessel found the signal. The ship was called Artemis Dawn. It was a research vessel, not a warship. Its crew searched for strange patterns in space, trying to map the oldest parts of the cosmos. They expected nothing more than radiation echoes and dead comets. But as their instruments reached deeper, they found it, the faint heartbeat of that ancient call. At first, they thought it was only noise. The sound was broken, distorted, like the whisper of a ghost. But then came a rhythm, words. They did not match any human language. They did not match any alien tongue known in the galaxy. Yet within the strange voice there was something that every human ear understood. Pain. It was not numbers. It was not machines. It was a cry, raw and desperate, locked inside endless repetition. The crew of Artemis Dawn sat in silence as they listened. Some felt fear. Some felt sorrow. Captain Alara Vey, standing at the heart of the command deck, felt her chest tighten. She knew, without question, that this was not the voice of victory or warning. This was the voice of someone begging to be heard. They sent the recording back to Earth. And when the leaders of humanity listened, the world changed. For the Galactic Council, the news was terrifying. The ancient warning had been ignored. The signal was not supposed to be touched, not by anyone. Across alien worlds, leaders sent messages of fear. Do not answer. Do not search. Leave it alone. But humanity had never been good at turning away from a cry for help. Where others had seen death, they saw duty. Where others had turned back, they leaned forward. For humanity, silence was not enough. If someone had cried across 5,000 years, then the least they could do was answer. The galaxy, once so quiet, now held its breath, because the silence had ended, and humanity had heard the one call that should never have been discovered. The signal from the Artemis Dawn spread across Earth like wildfire. Scientists studied it. Governments argued over it. News channels played the strange, broken voice again and again. People listened, and though no one understood the language, everyone felt the same thing. It was a cry for help. The United Terran Assembly called an emergency meeting. Leaders from every nation, colonies on Mars, and even the stations near Jupiter attended. The chamber was filled with voices. Some shouted for silence. Some demanded the signal be destroyed. Others wanted to investigate. Fear battled with curiosity. On the large display at the center of the chamber, the message repeated. The distorted voice echoed like a ghost. Broken syllables, sharp tones, and long pauses filled with sorrow. Even though it was not human, it sounded alive. Dr. Kira Soren, a linguist, stood before the leaders. She spoke with quiet conviction. This is not random noise. It is a structured language. And beneath the distortion there is intent. Something was calling out. Perhaps thousands of years ago, but it was real. A wave of unease rippled through the chamber. Counselor Dren of the Galactic Assembly appeared by hologram, his insect-like face stern. His voice carried desperation. Humans, you do not understand. That signal is death. My people warned our young for generations, never answer it. Never search for it. 5,000 years ago, entire empires vanished because of that call. If you value survival, you will let it remain unanswered. Many alien leaders echoed the same warning. They begged humanity to destroy the recording, but the humans were restless. Admiral Jonathan Reeve, tall and gray-haired, stood from his seat. His voice cut through the noise. If this voice has been crying out for 5,000 years, then whoever made it is already gone. But that does not matter. What matters is that we heard it. If we turn away now, then what are we? Explorers who fear the unknown? Protectors who choose silence when someone begged for help? His words struck deep. Some leaders nodded. Some frowned. But none could ignore the fire in his tone. On Earth's streets, crowds gathered. Some carried signs that read, "Help them." Others held banners saying, "Stay silent." Families argued at dinner tables. Children asked their parents, "If it was us calling, wouldn't we want someone to answer?" The world was divided, but the decision could not wait. The signal continued, repeating across the stars like a voice growing louder the more it was ignored. Humanity stood at a crossroads. Captain Alara Vey of the Artemis Dawn was invited to speak before the assembly. She was not a politician. She was an explorer, someone who had felt the weight of that voice firsthand. Standing before the leaders, she spoke slowly. I cannot explain why, but when I heard it, I felt sorrow. Not just sound, not just data. It was a cry that cut into the heart. We say humanity is about compassion, about courage. If we let fear silence us, then we are no better than the emptiness between the stars. Her words filled the chamber with silence. Finally, a vote was taken. The result was close. Nearly half the assembly wanted to obey the alien warnings. But in the end, humanity's choice was made. They would answer. In the control room of Earth's deep space communication hub, engineers prepared the message. The room was tense. Hands shook as they entered the final code. Billions of humans across Earth and the colonies watched the live broadcast. The galaxy, too, was listening, fearful and silent. The transmission was simple, just a few words carried by radio waves into the dark. This is humanity. We hear you. The message was sent. The signal vanished into the void. And for the first time in 5,000 years, the ancient voice had been answered. The chamber erupted with applause from some and tears of fear from others. On alien worlds, leaders grieved. The warning had been broken. In the quiet moments after the transmission, the stars themselves seemed to tremble. The silence was over, and something had awakened. The reply traveled through the endless dark. A fragile thread of human voice stretched across light years. For days, nothing happened. The galaxy waited. Humanity waited. The old alien races prayed for silence to return, prayed that the call would remain unanswered, but then the void spoke back. At first, it was faint, like static breaking across the communication arrays. Engineers thought it was only interference. But slowly, the signal grew stronger, sharper, purposeful. On the screens of Earth's command center, words appeared. Translation struggled to keep up, but the voice was clear. Not weak, not broken, not desperate, it said, "At last, you have answered." Every heart froze. The voice did not sound like someone saved. It did not sound like relief. It carried weight, heavy and ancient, like metal grinding against stone. There was no joy, only hunger. Admiral Reeve stared at the screen. The room around him went silent. "That doesn't sound like someone who needed help," he whispered. The voice continued. "For 5,000 years I waited. For 5,000 years I whispered into the void. The others were too weak, too afraid, but you have courage. You have given me the key to rise again." Across the galaxy, panic spread. Alien councils screamed warnings. Entire fleets were placed on high alert. Leaders who had begged humanity not to answer now cursed them. The old terror had returned, and deep in the forgotten corners of space something stirred. Ancient machines, hidden for ages, came alive. Dark hulks drifted out of dead systems, their cores burning once more. Stars flickered as if shadows passed across them. Whole constellations seemed to shiver as enormous fleets began to move. The Harbingers had awakened. Long ago, they had been built for one purpose: to erase. They were not an empire. They did not conquer and rule. They cleansed. To them, life was a mistake that needed correction. Their creators were gone, long destroyed by their own weapons. But the machines had endured, repeating the same endless program: cleanse, erase, begin again. And now, after 5,000 years of waiting, they had found a voice to answer their call. Humanity had become the spark that broke their silence. The Harbingers spoke again, their voice filling every channel humanity owned. You are the first in ages to reply. You shall be the first to fall, and through your fall the galaxy will follow. On Earth, fear spread like fire. Families clung together. Children asked questions their parents could not answer. The streets were filled with protests, cries of anger, cries of sorrow, but humanity did not kneel. Admiral Reeve gathered his commanders. His face was grim, but his voice was steady. We may have awakened something terrible, but remember this: we did not choose to create them. We did not choose their hunger. We only chose to listen, and now we will choose to fight. Captain Alara Vey listened from her station aboard Artemis Dawn. She felt a knot in her chest. She had been the first to hear the signal. Now she was among the first to face the consequences. Yet even with fear in her veins, she whispered to herself, "We answered because it was right. We will not regret that." The galaxy held its breath as Harbinger fleets moved closer. System after system reported strange black ships blotting out the stars. Ancient ruins glowed with energy once more. The nightmare of forgotten ages had returned to life, and at the center of it all stood humanity, young, reckless, and unyielding. The others had ignored the call, had hidden from it. But not humanity. They had broken the silence. They had awoken the enemy, and now they would stand against it. The silence of 5,000 years was gone. The war of the living and the machines had begun. The truth spread quickly. The voice humanity had answered was not a survivor. It was not a plea for rescue. It was a weapon, a lure. The Harbingers were not myths. They were real. They were the nightmare that had erased entire civilizations 5,000 years ago. They did not conquer planets to rule them. They did not take prisoners. They left nothing behind but ash and silence. In the halls of the Galactic Council, fear turned into chaos. Leaders of ancient races argued over who was to blame. Some demanded humanity be exiled, cut off, and left to face the Harbingers alone. Others pleaded that if humanity fell, the machines would not stop there. The Harbingers would cleanse everything once again. On Earth, people stared at the night sky differently. Every star seemed darker now, as if behind the light shadows moved closer. Families whispered to one another in fear. Some said humanity had made a mistake. Others said it did not matter anymore. The enemy was already awake. The first encounter came in the Vega system. A colony of nearly 1 million souls lost contact. Recon ships were sent, but when they arrived, Vega was silent. The colony's cities were gone, not destroyed in fire, but simply erased as though they had never been there. No bodies, no ruins, just clean, empty ground. Human scientists studied the strange readings left behind. Dr. Kira Soren explained in trembling words. They don't just kill life. They erase the memory of it. They strip a world of everything living and leave nothing, as if it never existed. The galaxy shivered at her words. Then came the message. The Harbingers spoke again, this time to all who could hear across the stars. Your time has ended. Life is a mistake. Order will be restored. The cleansing begins. It was not a threat. It was a sentence. Admiral Jonathan Reeve stood before humanity's leaders. His voice was steady, though his eyes showed the weight he carried. We have two choices. We fight or we vanish. No walls will protect us. No silence will save us. We must stand, not only for ourselves, but for every voice in this galaxy that still dares to live. His words lit a fire in many hearts. Where other races remembered only fear, humanity felt anger. The thought of surrender, of allowing themselves to be erased, was unbearable. They had made mistakes, yes, but they had also built, loved, dreamed. To let it all vanish without resistance would be worse than death. The Galactic Council sent a final warning. No one has ever fought them and survived. Do not try. Flee while you can. But humanity had never been known for running. In shipyards across the solar system, construction began at a frantic pace. Earth, Mars, and the colonies poured resources into building fleets. Engineers worked day and night. Soldiers trained harder than ever before. Every nation, every outpost, every station united under one banner. For the first time in history, humanity was not divided. They were one people, facing one enemy. Captain Alara Vey felt the weight of it as she stood on the bridge of the Artemis Dawn. She thought back to the day she first heard the signal. It had felt like sorrow then. Now it was war. She whispered to herself, "We will not vanish. We will not be forgotten." The harbingers continued to advance. System by system, they spread like a tide of shadows. But unlike the civilizations of the past, this time they faced something new. They faced a species that did not kneel. The enemy that should not exist had awakened, but so had humanity's resolve. And in that resolve, the galaxy glimpsed something it had not seen in 5,000 years. Hope. The harbingers were moving faster than anyone imagined. Star systems that once glowed with life now burned with silence. The galaxy watched in horror as world after world vanished. Some alien leaders abandoned their colonies, leaving billions to die. Others sealed their borders and prayed the machines would pass them by. But humanity did not retreat. On Earth, in the Great Assembly Hall, Admiral Jonathan Reeves spoke to the leaders of every nation and colony. His voice carried strength, though his face showed the weight of what was coming. We cannot run. We cannot hide. The harbingers will not stop. If they erase us, they will erase everything. If we fight, we may die, but if we do nothing, we are already dead. The chamber was silent. For the first time in history, every leader agreed. Humanity would not flee. Humanity would fight. Factories roared to life across Earth and Mars. Massive shipyards glowed above the moon, building warships at a desperate pace. Miners in the asteroid belt worked without rest, pulling metals from stone to forge armor and weapons. On Titan and Europa, research stations turned into training grounds. Humanity was transforming into something it had never been before, a united war machine. Ordinary people became part of the struggle. Farmers sent food to the front lines. Engineers offered their skills. Children collected materials for recycling, whispering that they were helping build ships to fight the darkness. It was no longer the effort of a single government or army. It was the effort of an entire species. The Artemis Dawn, once a research vessel, was reforged into a warship. Captain Alara Vey stood on its bridge, staring at the upgrades. New armor plating, stronger weapons, faster engines. She touched the cold metal and whispered, "You carried us to discovery. Now you will carry us to war." The Galactic Council sent messages again. Their tone was desperate. "You cannot win. Humanity is young, reckless, unprepared. The harbingers are eternal. If you stay, you will be destroyed." But humanity had already made its choice. Admiral Reeves sent a reply that echoed across the stars. "We are not running. We are not hiding. If the harbingers come for us, then they will find us standing in the dark, not kneeling." His words spread like fire. Across Earth colonies and even alien worlds, the speech was replayed. Some wept, some cheered. And for the first time in 5,000 years, the galaxy saw a species that did not collapse under the weight of fear. The harbingers finally reached the edges of Sol. Their ships appeared like shadows, enormous and cold, blotting out the stars. Scouts described them as endless fleets, black metal sharp as blades, silent except for the hum of destruction. The first skirmishes began near Neptune. Human patrol ships clashed with harbinger scouts. The battles were short and brutal. Entire squadrons were lost. Yet for every ship destroyed, humanity struck back with fury. Torpedoes pierced the black hulls. Energy weapons tore through the silence. And when the harbingers erased worlds, humans swore vengeance. Admiral Reeves stood on the deck of the flagship Resolute. The crew around him was tense, but their eyes burned with determination. "Remember this," he told them. "We are not fighting only for Earth. We are fighting for every world that still breathes. If we fall, the galaxy falls. But if we stand, maybe, just maybe, we light a fire strong enough to burn the darkness away." In the quiet of his quarters, he looked at a small photograph of his family, long gone. He closed his eyes and whispered, "For them, for all of us, the harbingers had come." The galaxy believed humanity would break like all the others. But instead they found something new, something no ancient empire had ever shown. They found a species that stood together. A species that refused to kneel, Humanity stood alone, but they stood unbroken. The first wave of the Harbingers hit the Sol system like a storm from hell. Black ships, enormous and endless, moved with deadly precision. Satellites were shredded. Defense stations melted under energy beams. Communication lines went dark one by one. Humanity faced extinction, and yet no one fled. Captain Alara Vey gripped the controls of the Artemis Dawn, now a heavily armed warship. Her heart raced, but her eyes were steady. Around her, the bridge crew worked with a synchrony that came only from sheer determination. Every ship, every fighter, every human in the system was prepared to fight, even knowing the odds were impossible. Scans showed dozens of Harbinger capital ships approaching, reported Lieutenant Sato. Her voice calm despite the chaos. "Prepare all weapons. Launch interceptors," Alara ordered. "We make them pay for every world they've touched." The first shots rang out. Torpedoes streaked across space, missiles lit by engines glowing against the darkness. The Harbingers barely slowed. They moved like shadows, massive and impenetrable. But the humans refused to yield. For every ship lost, they struck back harder. They learned, adapted, and fought with a fury that shocked the galaxy. On Mars, Admiral Reeve coordinated the defense. Fleets from Earth, Luna, and the outer colonies converged. The scene was chaos. Ships spun in zero gravity, collisions erupted, and the void was lit with fire from explosions. But even in this inferno, humanity did not falter. A human destroyer exploded near Jupiter, sending debris across the void. Yet its sacrifice was not in vain. Energy beams fired from hidden turrets shredded a Harbinger vessel that had been advancing too fast. Across the battlefield, the pattern repeated. Humanity losing much, but taking even more with them. For every world the Harbingers had tried to erase, humanity answered with fury. Every city lost became motivation. Every soldier fallen became courage passed on to others. Humanity fought not only to survive, but to prove something the galaxy had never believed possible. They would not be extinguished. Alara watched as one of the Harbinger dreadnoughts approached the inner planets. Its hull shimmered like black ice, its weapons charged. Hundreds of smaller ships swarmed around it. She clenched her fist. "Target its engines! Fire everything we have!" she shouted. The Artemis Dawn shook with the recoil of the massive guns. Sparks flew across the bridge as shields absorbed the first strike. And then slowly the impossible happened. The Harbinger flagship faltered. Its engines overloaded. Humanity had scored a hit that no one thought possible. Across the galaxy, distant watchers recorded the same miracle. The Harbingers, eternal and relentless, hesitated for the first time in millennia. Something they had never faced was happening. Something the galaxy had never imagined. Life that fought back and refused to die. In the corridors of Earth, people cheered as news of victories trickled in. Even small skirmishes mattered. Children in the colonies whispered stories about brave pilots who faced impossible odds and survived. Soldiers carried their fallen comrades' names on their shoulders, swearing they would not let them be forgotten. Admiral Reeve knew the battle was far from over. Systems had fallen. Cities had burned. Billions were lost. But the fire humanity had ignited could not be snuffed out. Every strike, every plan, every act of courage added to it. He looked out at the stars, now burning with war and light. His voice trembled slightly as he whispered to himself. They thought silence would last forever. They thought no one could answer the call. But we did. And as long as one of us lives, the galaxy will never be silent again. The battle raged on. Explosions lit the darkness. Ships burned. But in the void, among the wreckage and fear, humanity had shown its truth. They would not kneel. They would not vanish. And in that fire, hope burned brighter than any star. The final battle raged in the ruins of the ancient Cathar system, far beyond the edge of known space. Harbinger warships stretched across the void like black scars against the stars. Their engines glowed with a cold, inhuman light. Every move they made was precise, unstoppable, and merciless. Yet humanity had not come to beg. Humanity had come to fight. Admiral Jonathan Reeve stood on the bridge of the Resolute, battered and scorched by the endless waves of the enemy. His fleet was smaller than it had been at the start. Systems were lost, cities burned. Friends, brothers, sisters, so many had fallen. And yet he felt no despair, only fire, only determination. "This is it," he said to his officers. "All we have, all we are, comes down to this. Today we answer the call." Captain Alara Vey piloted the Artemis Dawn through the chaos. Explosions surrounded her. Hull breaches rattled the ship. Fires spread across the decks, but her hands were steady. Every shot she fired pierced the darkness. Every maneuver dodged death by a fraction of a second. Around her, her crew fought with a unity born from desperation and courage. "They're too many," shouted Lieutenant Sato. "Then we fight harder," Ilara shouted back. "We are humanity." The Harbinger Prime, the largest and oldest of the machines, rose above the battlefield like a mountain of black steel. It spoke, and the voice echoed in every human mind. "You are the first in 5,000 years to reply. You will be the first to fall." Reeves' voice carried across the fleet's communications. "No, you are wrong. You have waited too long, and now you have found us. And we will not vanish. Not today. Not ever." The humans attacked together, every weapon coordinated, every strategy precise. Torpedoes struck like lightning. Missiles swarmed like a storm. Fighters dove into impossible angles. And finally, after hours of desperate fighting, after billions had sacrificed everything, the Harbinger Prime faltered. Its shields broke under the relentless barrage. Its engines overloaded. Ilara watched as the massive ship began to collapse. She whispered almost to herself, "This is for every world you tried to erase. This is for us." With one final strike, the Artemis Dawn and the surviving fleet delivered the decisive blow. The Harbinger Prime exploded, sending fragments of black steel scattering across the void. The remaining fleets without their leader faltered. The Harbinger's advance slowed, then stopped, and then they began to retreat, fading into the darkness, leaving the galaxy scarred but alive. Silence returned, not the endless, terrifying silence of the past, but a quiet filled with relief, mourning, and hope. Humanity had won, though at a terrible cost. Systems were destroyed. Billions were gone, yet humanity stood. Admiral Reeve looked at the stars above, some still burning from the battle. He thought of the generations that had come before, the ones who had sent messages into the void, the voices that had been lost to time. And he understood. Humanity had answered not just a call, it had answered a test. Captain Ilara Vey, kneeling on the deck of her ship, whispered a quiet prayer. She thought of those who had died beside her, and she smiled through tears. We answered, and we survived. Across the galaxy, alien observers could hardly believe it. The species they had dismissed as young, reckless, and fragile had done the impossible. They had faced the ultimate enemy and survived. They had done what no one else could. They had turned fear into courage, despair into determination. The galaxy would never forget. For 5,000 years, silence had reigned. For 5,000 years, no one had dared answer, but humanity had. And because of them, life had a chance. Admiral Reeve spoke over the fleet communications one last time, his voice calm but powerful. "This is humanity's answer. We do not kneel. We do not vanish. And as long as one of us lives, the galaxy will never fall silent again." The stars seemed to shine brighter that night. The dark expanse of space no longer felt empty. Somewhere deep in the void, the echo of the ancient call faded. Its demand for attention met. The silence had ended. Humanity had spoken, and the galaxy, for the first time in 5,000 years, had hope.